Recording. And greetings. My name is Mike Blinder. I am the publisher of E&P Magazine. Most of you know the platform Zoom. Prior to COVID, odds are you'd had no idea what it was, but we all just jumped on this magic platform. But let me be clear about something. We're not on regular Zoom meeting, which I'm sure all of you are using now in some way, shape, form, or size. We're on what's called Zoom webinar, which means you cannot speak. Well, you can speak, but you just can't speak to us. The way Zoom webinar works is we're in control of only a panel that we'll be presenting to you, but we want to hear from you. We want interaction. We want lively dialogue. So there is a chat button that I want you to focus on. Let me be very clear about this. Don't raise your hand, don't Q&A, because no one's going to be watching that, because we just got to keep our eyes in one spot. So we're on chat, and that's where you can ask a question, make a comment, yell at us, scream at us, whatever you want. But I urge the forum today, including my panelists, because for some strange reason, Zoom defaults live chat to a pull down that says panelist only. And I don't want that. I even want our panelists to respond directly to everyone as well. So when you do go into chat, if you wish, please push it down to panelists and attendees. That way, everybody's going to see the comments, what we're saying, what we're doing, and we can keep a lively dialogue going on, as well as some people from legacy.com, I should mention, our host today, and a very, very strong and wonderful partner of editor and publisher. Thank you, legacy.com, for providing this in-depth content, this latest information to the industry. Some of their brainiacs and pros will be in the chat room as well, because they understand this content much more than I do. I'm simply your host through the next 1 hour journey, and they'll give you links, information, or as I've been told, they'll even say, we'll get back to you, and then find whatever information you need in order to become more, how should I say, take more advantage of this wacky world of the world of excuse me, I'm just trying to get my mouse into the right position now. This world of private party obits, a big and important part of our industry. But before we get to that, I'd like to now introduce my panel and have a little fun here first while we introduce the group to you, because first of all, Brian Walsh, you and I are not, we've met before, we've worked, and we know each other, but you are Senior Director of Classified Advertising at Lee Enterprises, correct, sir?
That's correct.
Now that encompasses everything, not just the topic of today, which is obits, but that also puts you in front of all the verticals, correct?
That is correct, yes.
For those who are not familiar with Lee Enterprises, we do have people who join us from the niche media world now, broadcasting. Could you just do a quick elevator pitch on who Lee Enterprises is today?
Yeah, so Lee, we are in 77 markets in 26 states, and basically, we've got a full service digital agency that we've implemented to kind of, up our game across the company, that we've utilized in many of the categories, including the ones that I oversee, which is obituaries, recruitment, legal, real estate, and then general classified. But we are all over the country, pretty much well represented, and we have some major metros in the areas of St. Louis and Buffalo, as well as Richmond and Lincoln.
So what is your smallest market? I mean, just give me an example of the smallest market that you're still responsible for, as well as St. Louis. I mean, how small are the Lee papers, some of them?
Well, and we're pretty diversified in that aspect. We have some very small markets, and we've got some very large markets. So we base ours into what we call tiers, and basically the tiers are 1, 2, and 3, with 3 being the smallest. But if you look at like the state of Nebraska and the state of Virginia, we've got a huge footprint in both of those states, with many of the footprint being tied to smaller markets, which are still very important to us.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that means that you are responsible for a whole mess of different ecosystems of publishers and what they have to go through. It's not one size fits all. Am I correct?
That's correct. We, like much of our brethren in the newspaper industry, have kind of gone at it a little differently in terms of how we manage markets, whether that's a market president, a publisher, general manager, or a senior vice president of sales, which does also have editorial responsibilities.
Okay, great. I'm going to bring in our friends from Legacy right now. The gentleman who's been helping me put this entire program together is Ernie, I want to say it right, as in both, Ernie Roth.
I think you're on mute, Mike.
Ernie, now you're there. I apologize. Something weird went on. We had a power glitch here in Tampa with a thunderstorm. Those of you that know Tampa Bay know we have thunderstorms constantly. Please forgive me. Let's continue our dialogue. All of our guests are still on board. Everything's working properly. Fingers crossed. Ernie, you've helped me put this together. Would you explain to me why this is an exciting time for the end of life trends and why you wanted to get this information out in front of the news media industry as quickly as possible? What's going on? Why are we here today?
Sure. Well, a couple of reasons, Mike. You'll recall that back in the winter, right, some of the legacy team members, right, put together a white paper that talked about trends related to death care, right, and memorialization, and then some recommendations, right? And we had a good turnout at a webinar and talked about some things. Subsequent to that, right, we've spent time, right, working on a platform to enable private parties to place obituaries in any newspaper, in the United States, or more than one, depending on their interests or preferences. And Legacy's a company that's been around for 20 plus years, and supporting newspapers and obituaries has been, right, and is, right, paramount to us. It's what we come in and do every day, including on this private party initiative. And so we've got some information as a follow-up, if you will, to what we discussed back in the winter on this particular topic.
Let me throw it over to Dan now. Dan, I understand you're the guy, well, you're CRO, Chief Revenue Officer of Legacy, but I understand that this has been like almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've been told this is like your pet project. You've been crunching these numbers, looking at them and advising on how this information should be disseminated and used to benefit the industry. Am I correct, sir?
Yeah, no, I would not call it a pet project. This is the most important thing we're doing at Legacy, I think.
Thank you.
And I think, the light bulb went off for us, I believe, late last summer, early fall, when we were with a publisher who said, if you guys could just help me get one more obit a month, right? It was such a small request, but he was like passionate about like just driving more orders. And Legacy, we manage people's online obituary presence, but we never have driven orders the way we can now, and that's the exciting thing. So
I was told that this chart that I'm now sharing with the audience, and by the way, if you can't see this graphic that special, well, you can always reach out to the folks at Legacy for more information. They'll help you get any data that you might need, but this is all about a new generation. Am I right? Dan, I mean, about, people like me who are 65 that used to get the Philadelphia Inquirer when I was a kid on Sundays and read it cover to cover. There's a new generation as the boomers, I am a boomer, leaving us. The whole new world operates below me in the millennials and the Gen X's and other in a different way. And you're trying to keep this critical content still flowing, even in a whole new era. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, no, think of it this way, like all trends lead to more obituaries, right? That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be published in newspapers, but more obituaries with more deaths, right? And the people you need to be catering to are the children, right, of the boomers, the millennials, and they are a digital first, digital natives. We've all heard that, right? But they truly are. They want to be able to do self-service online, and it's, I'm going to steal from a later line, but it's just like e-commerce, right? Your obituary intake is e-commerce. And so you need to be catering towards the millennials, is that first kind of the boomers leaving us. That's what the main takeaway there is.
Now, this should be a pretty much a duh. I mean, right, Ernie? I mean, we all claim that we're dealing with the disruption and we're all moving forward. But as a guy who just spoke at 16 conferences around the country in the past 7 or 8 months, and I'm trying to work, and I still consult larger media companies and what have you, and I am, we stay on top of the industry through editorial and editor and publisher. This is not an industry that go, and I'm not being negative, it's just we have to look at ourselves in a mirror. We don't change quick enough sometimes. Would you agree with that, Ernie? It must be, we should be moving quickly like some nimble companies, but sometimes legacy media tends to move a bit slower. And how damaging would it be to legacy media? I guess I already know the answer, but I'd like you to say it. If we don't start changing our mindset about how we approach end of life information, these obits.
Yeah, listen, I think about it, or legacy and the companies that work with us think about it really as an opportunity, right? So, and Dan pointed that out. There are going to be plenty of people looking to write obituaries and do memorializations for their loved ones, right? More than ever, when you look at the chart 1, right? How they remember people and what they do, that's to be determined, and where they publish and get the word out, that's up in the air, right? In many ways, but what an opportunity, right? And that's what we wanted to use the trends to point out. Not only the death rate trend, remarkable, right, over the next 20, 25 years, but also the shift, right, continued shift into cremation, right? And as part of that shift, right, you also get, we called it the DIY funeral planning for a reason, right? You've got a lot of cremations happening with no services, or with no immediate services, right? So the need for traditional funeral home arrangements and that full kind of premium, right,
Yes.
white glove focus that's definitely changing, right?
There we go.
And you couple that with the third point that we see is, look, and it's even happening in the last couple months where we see volume stats on obit placement with our newspaper partners, and they are, that's down. And as the COVID, right, as that moved around over a couple of years, is that playing a role? Sure it is, but we think there's other things going on, right? And funeral homes, while they want to help families, and when families want an obit in a newspaper, they're going to help facilitate that more often than not. They clearly are competitors with newspapers too, right? In terms of online traffic and activity, and just share of wallet, right? So they aren't always the newspaper's friend, and that's sort of spiked up, right? There are 5 or 6 companies in the business of hosting funeral home websites, Mike, and many of those players, right? It's a competitive landscape there, but many of them do everything they can to discourage placement of obits in newspapers, right? If you got one of them on the phone, they would tell you that, right? And so, not that the funeral homes, we're not saying they aren't important, they definitely are, and there's additional ways newspapers should always be talking about the value prop, particularly a digital value prop going forward. But we just think catering or nurturing the private party is really important for all these reasons and trends. And there's volume there, not only just insurance against what's happening with funeral homes, but additional activity.
Dan, you guys are you're walking a fine. I want you to stick around, Brian. I'm definitely going to, flip the letter and get over to you. But Dan, you guys have to really, at Legacy, dance a very fine line, because you have relationships with funeral homes all over the country, where you're trying to make sure they have the right ways to do something very important, which is memorialize this. And also, but in a way, you also have to make sure you're serving our industry, because not only, correct me if I'm wrong, is this a revenue stream, that helps finance the journalism. More importantly, it's critical content, is it not? That makes us whole and even more ingratiated to the communities we serve. Am I saying that right?
I think you are. And look, what we tell funeral homes, is why wouldn't you place in the newspaper, right? It's your largest source of free advertising. If you're going to pay Google $3.50 a click, right, to get people to your funeral website, why wouldn't you have the family place in the newspaper and get all that free traffic, right? I mean, we keep promoting the newspapers, right, to the funeral homes and as a vehicle for exposure, right, for those funeral homes. And it is a massive vehicle for them, right? And because we have all this tracking and we can track all the traffic that we send to them. And once they get it, the light bulb goes off. Right.
So, but then again, in a way, they're not seeing that value. Sometimes they're just moving in their own direction, and offering a DIY is another feature that we have to start growing up and understanding, that it's not just by having a cool relationship with your local funeral home where you're automatically going to be getting this critical revenue. But one other question before I swing it over to Lee. Ernie, is it not also important for the critical question to be asked, where else has Dad lived? It's not just where he passed away that you want to have that memorial, correct? He may have spent 30 years of his life in another city, and should it not be memorialized there? Isn't that part of the process as well that helps all of us, again, with revenue, but more importantly, have this critical information for the communities? Am I correct, sir?
You are. I mean, when family members are writing the obituaries, right, and creating a life story, which is how we like to think about it, right, that includes a lot of information, right? And people are, their lives can span a lot of different places, a lot of different activities. And so it's got context for placement in more than one community in many cases, right? We're seeing that with this private party platform. Our sister company Memoriams has seen that and working with funeral homes, right? With the same kind of capabilities. And so, yes, it's great if the loved one lived somewhere most of their life, went to high school in one town, college another, or did something, right, that was important to them in a community. Yes, that community may be would want to know about that person's passing for sure.
All right, Brian. So here you are as senior director of you say classified ads, which goes way beyond just what we're discussing now, which is the obit category. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. Does that also put you in the public notice place as well? Are you keeping is that part of your purview, Brian, or not?
Yes, it is.
So isn't this similar in a way that if we stay in the old way and just wait for the phone call from the local city government, not offer DIY opportunities and more innovative ways, we could be losing that critical content as well? Is this one of the reasons that you're embracing a DIY approach to obits across the country at Lee?
Well, as anything, any of the categories that I handle, and you're right, those two are very similar
Right.
in terms of categories. But as anything we do, and for those of us who have been in this business a long time, you've got to evolve, you've got to change. That even goes with something so traditional as obituaries. And as Dan mentioned the word e-commerce, we have always thought of the obit private party placement as e-commerce. I mean, we embraced this about 6 years ago, where we noticed an opportunity based on kind of trends and what things were happening within our markets. And what we saw was more families were placing obits directly with our newspapers, as well as we were getting obits from funeral homes that were being paid for directly by the families through their credit card. So it wasn't part of the funeral package. So we started to think something was going on there, and kind of peeled back the layers and found that, especially in our major metros, that many of the larger funeral homes were carrying a $10,000, $20,000 balance with the newspapers every month. And however that coincided with their being paid from the families, they just wanted to get away from that. So they started to encourage the families to deal directly with us. And we also found out that families liked placing the notices themselves, because those of us that have dealt with funeral homes and are planned a service or been involved, many of the funeral homes have a note card with like 6 bullets that they'll ask you basic information so they can get that to the newspaper and be done with it. Whereas families can sit there either directly with the newspaper or through self-serve and build this and write this how they want. Back in 6 years ago, we saw e-commerce in the world we live in, the popularity of, online shopping and everything else. And we decided we were going to try to pilot e-commerce obituary for private party. And we did that in St. Louis. Very little promotion. We created a call to action block ad that we placed on our obit page. And then within days, we started receiving orders from private party through there. And that continued to build and build. And in many cases, these were larger obits than we were getting through the funeral homes. And one of the things that opened our eyes with that pilot was we all know how many people visit our obit pages on our websites. But what we were able to do essentially was take our audience and readers and turn them into paid customers. They were now placing obits through our obit channel. So that quickly took off, and we thereafter rolled that out through all of Lee, and we saw the same results. And really what we found is we were providing a service that our readers and families wanted and needed. We weren't trying to cut out the funeral homes, but we were just trying to create as many possible ways for someone to place an obit. And, as you mentioned before, kind of keeping up with the times, I've thought self-serve, e-com has always been a no-brainer, because in many cases, as you mentioned, Mike, with the funeral homes, they're going to love this. They're no longer the go-between. They're no longer that back and forth tennis ball. And frankly, people in today's society use e-commerce for a couple of reasons. One, for convenience, and two, because they don't want to deal with anybody. They just want to go on, buy it, and be done. And as Ernie mentioned, I think it's really important for our industry to embrace this. With cremations on the rise, many times funeral homes aren't involved at all. So we have to be providing a platform for families to be able to talk about their loved ones outside of our funeral homes. And that's just really kind of, like I said, sign of the times, and to embrace change and move forward.
It's funny that it goes way beyond, because I remember studies 20 years ago where we finally figured out that when you had a call center taking classified ads, you're much younger than I am, but I remember the study back in 2002, and I was part of that study with a gentleman by the name of Peter Zollman. And Brian, the study proved that if you have a call center, they're all saying, well, you can do 2 words for 2 lines for $2. But if you gave someone a chance to type the ad themselves, they become much more beautiful. And we're not communists. You make more money because there's more lineage. And this world now, if you look at the world historically, again, I'm going to add my 2 cents. Crisis has always accelerated change. And here we went through a pandemic. And during that pandemic, I've seen research that people who were not digitally prone to want to use apps to buy things or apps to pick up, have got into that space as well. So don't think it's just Gen Zs and millennials that are doing e-commerce. Am I right? There are people who are now very comfortable ordering their McDonald's food before they show up and simply have it handed to them when they get to the restaurant or what have you. This is another way that DIY is benefiting. Am I right, sir?
Absolutely. Again, this is, we still take obits from funeral homes, and we will do that until we turn off the lights. But to see what we've seen over the last 6 years in terms of the growth and the amount of notices placed via e-commerce, like you said, it is not just a certain age group. It's from one age group from this end to the other end. So it's a different time with people are more savvy with internet and with purchasing. Like I said, e-commerce, I keep referring to that word, but anybody that's bought anything online can place an online obituary, and that's most of us.
So let's get back to our folks here at Legacy, because I want to get into the nuts and bolts of this thing now. We're talking about the trends first, and I think we got to make sure that everybody understands that we adapt or die. I don't want to get scary and get all this, but it's true. We've already seen that now with private, with all forms of private party, and now with, no matter how, I'm not sanctioning a vendor or anything, but if you think that public notices should be taken by Gladys in your back room, only when Gladys is at her desk, forget that. Lawyers file divorce papers at 11 o'clock at night, and that's when they want to get that private party in, if that county requires it to be, or whatever. So we're in the same boat now. We have to adapt or die. But now legacy.com is an amazing company. Sometimes we think of it as just this wonderful company benefiting the industry, helping us, but you guys are very technologically savvy. And I'd like you to kind of take us on a little tour. Tell me what you have built in this private party management world, gentlemen, that is making it so simple and easy. I don't know, would that be for you, Dan, or who would is that Ernie or Dan? Do you want to field that? And I'm going to bring up some slides you guys told me that you have.
Well, first, Dan, we'll tag team it.
Okay, go ahead and tag team it.
We've built, we'll tag team it. So we've built this private party management platform, right? That's integrated with our obituary experience. It's got 7-day-a-week customer service. You're part of a larger obituary network. I can get into that a little bit later. And then we also do obit verification. So we will screen and confirm the death, and then we'll screen the obit for appropriate content. So it's a turnkey solution that we've built that's directly sort of integrated in with our the hosting platform that we have for our newspaper partners.
What's an obit verification? Excuse my ignorance, sir. Why is that important?
So it's, in this day and age, you need to confirm that the person has actually passed, meaning there are some people that would put nefarious, fake obits online.
You're kidding.
And they will.
No, really?
Unfortunately, yes. No.
What kind of a world? That sounds a little, sorry, I should just shut up because I just assume that's kind of weird, but
yes.
you have to, so technically all obits have to be verified before they're published.
Private party obits, particularly because if they come from a funeral home, that's the verification, right? Because a funeral home is handling that. But private party, right? Newspapers, you have protocols in place to verify, confirm the death of an individual, and that's what we have, started doing because of what we saw with the private party as this started to build.
And because if you have all this data already, it's easy for you to, is that like an instant verification process? Or do you say, give us 24 hours to make sure this guy's really, I mean, how does that operate?
We have to build time into the process for sure.
Okay.
Just like people do today, right? Because in some cases it can be easy, right? As simple as looking at a funeral home website to find that particular person, right? Or maybe it's the same obit in some cases. In other cases, there's a call that has to be made to a funeral director or funeral home. And in some cases, the purchaser of the obituary, the consumer, right, has to be contacted. So it depends, really.
I'm going to ask a really stupid question, and maybe it's just me, but we have E&P's audience is growing by leaps and bounds in the niche publishing industry, which is what E&P is. I mean, it's funny, I operate a B2B environment that sells, well, I don't want to say our advertising, but provides information to an environment that gives content B2C. So my question to you is this: one of the biggest, most high traffic parts of my website is Obits. It's also movers and shakers. We've managed, and I'm going to brag a little, since I've taken over E&P. When I took it over 3 years ago this month, there was 1 page of news people. Now I have 11, and I have photos of everybody, and our Obits page is full. There are many niche publishers that do this now. I mean, and I met them all at a wonderful, big, huge conference, very big industry. Should someone who's in the wine business, where everybody knows each other and goes to conferences, who might put up, the great winemaker so-and-so passed last month, should they have a similar system? Or is that not where you guys are? Am I asking a really stupid question, Dan? Or could any publisher give access to this kind of a tool?
Yeah, I mean, we work with any publisher. We've got 2,600 newspapers in the obituary tool, so consumers can come in, right? They can place not only directly into a newspaper's or any publication, right? Obit section, right? But they can also choose between any one of a number of 2,600 other newspapers. It's actually over 2,600 now, other publishers that they can place into. So the answer is yes, we can do specialty verticals, and
that's what I was wondering.
Sure.
That might be the future too, where we become we become the gateway. So if the gentleman was a dentist who passed, it could also be in a dental magazine. You see what I'm saying as well? But that to me is important. That's what I would want from when my father passed a few years ago. He was a dentist for 65 years, well known. He taught at Penn Dental School. He was president of the Pennsylvania Society of Dentistry. That's a place. This could be a nice futuristic. I'm sorry if I'm going off in tangents. You guys can shut me down if you want. All right, talk to me about this, the obituary intake system itself. It's clean. It's mobile. It's something that would make a millennial comfortable. Correct? This whole environment you guys built.
Well, I think Brian touched on this, right? It is e-commerce, and think of Amazon, right? Think of Amazon cart. Amazon is constantly using their data of people that go through at each step of their funnel, right? And optimizing at each step. And that's what Legacy is doing with this private party platform, right? We're seeing where we're finding the friction points in the funnel. We're fixing it. We're testing new versions. We're constantly testing. And every 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to see a different version and or A/B test going on to optimize conversion rate. And
obviously you're looking at all the metrics and data and learning from it on a daily basis. This is so new. Let's swing back to our folks at Lee. Brian, let's talk revenue. Okay. I mean, let's talk money now. I mean, and I'm assuming that your bosses are watching your bottom line. They want to make sure you're also bringing in good revenue from all the different decisions you make. It was your call, I'm sure, to make sure that you were part of this network. How's it going? I mean, is Lee seeing value from this? I mean, you were one of the first adapter, correct me if I'm wrong, to take on this DIY product. Can you give us a little bit of an update on how it's going?
Yeah, I mean, so this was just a natural extension for us. We were already doing this locally. So as I mentioned at the offset, the way that I look at this piece of business is we need to have as many potential entry points as possible for folks to place obits. And I think what enticed me the most about memoriams and this side of the business was the ability for people out of state to have the ability to place in multiple markets. As you mentioned, that using your father as an example, the dentist. Well, we have many people that, that move to Florida to retire. Well, they're from St. Louis. So they'd like to place an obit both in the Florida paper as well as in St. Louis. So that alone is something I've been following for some time, working with Ernie and folks before this even came about. So we have regular kind of conversations where we brainstorm about things just like this. So it really, to me, this, as I said before, is an update. Anything doing on this front is a no-brainer. It's only going to help and grow the revenue opportunities for you, because I believe you're going to get people placing obits that might not otherwise would have. And also when someone's telling their life story and they're doing it on their own, 25 to 30% increase in size of the obit is what we've seen from day one. So it's something that I was very excited when this was rolled out, and we were very excited to be kind of first in line to be a part of it. And I couldn't be happier so far. Dan or Ernie, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, one thing I'll add is when you talked about KPIs a minute ago, Mike, two of the interesting stats that are on that one map slide are, we've seen over about 50% of the obits placed, the decedent, right, is not in the same state as the newspaper or newspapers of choice for the family member placing the
Say
obit.
that again. That's important, isn't it? That is important.
Yeah. So it's the second bullet here. 45% of the decedents, right, that are, where obits are coming through this platform are in a different state at the time of death, right, than
like
where the family member is placing the newspapers of choice, right, for that family, right, to share the memorialization of the loved one. And a little more than that, a little more than 50%, the purchaser, the consumer, the family member is also in a different state. And that one, I still think it's a big number, an interesting number for sure.
I thought it would be bigger
to be in the network. That was a little less surprising to us than the 45%, right? And you can also see the 15%, and that number's ticking up a little bit for us recently in terms of the multiple newspaper orders, right? One or more than one paper is part of a purchase by a consumer. So listen, what's that saying, right? You make none of the shots you don't take, right? So if you're not in the network, right, just off of these stats alone, right, you should take a look, because there is out of market activity, right? I think the definition of a market expands because of this, but when you're just talking pure geography, right, there's out of market activity available for the 2,800 and growing, right, papers in the private party network right now.
I do want to urge our audience, and it's growing as we speak, to please get into chat if we're not covering a topic, if we're saying something you don't understand, if you have a question, you have like a link sent to you, just go to the bottom of the screen, click on chat and ask a question. Joe, though, did not do that. He went to Q&A, but I went to Q&A to get Joe's question. How does verification handle the situation when different family members submit different obituaries for the same deceased person? I had no idea this happens. Family differences, squabbles, can have different thoughts of what should be in the obit. Can there be two bits for the same deceased person? Is this an issue in your world or not? I have no idea.
I know that Legacy's got a big newspaper support team, right, that's always been in place, right, since the early days of the business, and does some of the things does a form of the things we're doing now. Like we've screened content, certain kinds of content for a long time. There are definitely situations that our team encounters around whether it's that specific case where two different family members are submitting obits, sometimes in different newspapers, right? That's happened. Or there's just a little bit of there's some drama around the content of one obit. And you know what? There's not one standard answer for it. So clearly the verification though has to happen, right? The person's either passed away or not, right? And there's a process, right? A legal process for that. And so we can figure that out. And newspapers are doing that now, no matter if there's this other stuff going on in the background.
All right, I want to get back into some of the numbers when it comes to profit for people like Brian here. And it's not a deal breaker, but let's assume someone comes in and from one of Brian's papers in let's say Montana, and then decides that since mom did spend 20 years in St. Louis, or let's just say a market they don't cover like Altoona, and they place the ad in the Altoona paper, does Brian get a piece of the action? Is there a commission? Is there, since it went through his portal, or is it just you're offering the convenience of this for the customer?
Well, let me explain the portal concept, right? As part of the answer. So if someone was going through a Lee site in Montana, right, they would see on the front end, right, they would see what that particular paper is offering, right, in the network. So their choice there is the Montana paper, right, which when you're working directly, right, that's the right solution, right? If someone's accessing, is expressing interest in placing an obit that way, right?
Okay.
And so now as that process is completed, right, and that obit is purchased, there is a teaser, right, that lets somebody place someplace else if that's what they want to do, right? As we speak today, there is not, right, an extra commission, right, from one paper to another for a paper that an order is placed, right, that way, right, for the kind of the home paper, if you will. But I can tell you, right, this whole process, like when Dan was describing the cart, and there's a lot of iteration. We're testing and iterating like every week on different things. So it's an interesting question. There are other ways someone can get to the platform where it is more generic, right? If you were just coming in from search or some other way, and we don't necessarily know what you're interested in, right? But you're interested, then you can see the whole, right, collection of papers, right? The 27 or 2800 to choose from.
Talk to me about this question from Ben. I'm in Q&A. Some people say they're having trouble with chat. I have absolutely no idea, but I'm keeping an eye on Q&A as well. Does this process calculate the rate and immediately allow for payment? Is the rate set individually by the paper? I mean, and that's a good question. Does Brian here tell you the rate, or does Legacy tell you the rate? How are rates determined? Maybe you could cover a little bit of that.
Yeah, I can take a shot, and then I'll start, and Dan can certainly add some color. The rates come from the papers, right? So again, like if we're working with whether it's and look, we've got small, medium, and large papers and markets in the network, as you might expect with that number of papers total. But in like a case with Lee, we worked a combination of, hey, Memoriam's had some information, starting information from the funeral home side of their business, right? And that was a baseline. Then we used Brian and some of his market leaders to vet or supplement that information. And that can be an ongoing process, right?
Sure.
And should there be a case where the rate is not right, where it needs to be, right? We correct that, right, after one sort of alert that we know, either from the newspaper, right, or a consumer, and Legacy is covering that. So if somehow we undercharged, right, the newspaper gets the full amount, right, their full obit price. If a consumer is overcharged, we are providing a refund, right, or the difference, right, back to the person. But yes, we get the rates are newspaper, right, driven.
And were you gonna add to that at all, sir? Dan, or did you want to say something about that, or not?
No, I think he nailed it. I mean, the newspaper gets the revenue for the obituary.
Okay, cool.
To answer Ben's question.
And then Brian, you're in control of your rates. You determine the lineage. You're not told, like when I'm selling my house, which I'm doing right now, they tell me what my square footage cost is. I'm at the mercy of the realtor based on the market. Brian can charge whatever he wants for his obits. Correct? He's in control of his inventory. That's good. let's get into some of the successes now. I have a slide that I really found fascinating. May I share it with you that you guys gave me? I was going over this deck you sent me because I wanted to get, really immerse myself into this. New England versus New York versus Midwest. Are you seeing everything similar around the country? I mean, is this so new it's hard to even start figuring out how it's all going to settle?
Well, let me just mention one thing, and then Dan knows a lot of the details here, so he can dive in for the audience. But look, when this started, traditionally, right, the West Coast has been largely private party, right? So look, we have partners where they're nearly all their obits come from private party, right? It's like in the 90%, right, percentile. So and we knew that going in. So when we started looking at what are the early returns on, different parts of the country, we just did this because this was the way to genericize, right, the information rather than saying this is a specific newspaper or group, right? So it's not, we're still learning a lot, but what we focused on areas that, have been less traditionally private party to see what the story tells based on the data. Is that fair, Dan?
Yep, that's exactly it.
All right. So I'm going to circle back to Brian now. One of the conversations we were having in our green room before you joined into the conversation, Brian, we had a little, get together is Legacy's mission just to make Brian money, or is Legacy's mission to help Brian in the decade have the content that's critical to still serve his communities? I mean, and this is why I always ask, because, I'm with E&P, I'm straddling a line. I have a complete, total 100% advertising background. I mean, now I'm publishing a magazine. Thank God the editorial people are 15 times smarter than me, and they're making sure we're in the right spaces doing that. And I focus on the business side. But I know it's important for our industry to not lose content that made us what we were over the years. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Brian, I know you're young, but Lee has a heritage, right? I mean, you're working for a brand that owns brands that have been around for centuries. And during those centuries, people were proud to see their births in there and their wedding announcements, right? And their business advancements. And of course, the final, that final message of tribute to a person's legacy, if I can use that term. Brian, are you looking at both sides of that equation, and how do you advise the rest of the industry? Since, let's be honest, you're one of a handful of people driving this right now. I mean, because you're in charge of this vertical at Lee. You have a counterpart, I'm sure you chat with, at Gannett, who most probably chats with the counterpart at Hearst, who may chat with the person at Adams. You get my drift. There's a lot. I mean, I know there's a lot of individual small publishers, but let's face it, what you guys do affects the rest of the industry, good or bad, right or wrong. How important is all that to Lee, to you? And what advice would you give other publishers about maintaining this content, Brian?
I mean, obviously, revenue is most important in many of our cases, but the way I've looked at this category is relevancy. How do we remain relevant in this space long term, where it used to be, okay, well, we're short revenue here, okay, increase the obits, rate increase, nothing tied to it. So what I've really tried to do is with, like I said, the self-serve e-com is a service that people desire and want and need. We see that every day with the number of placements we're getting, both internally as well as through the network now. But ultimately what we have done and what I've tried to do over the last several years is add value across the board. So add value to the families placing those obits, add value to the funeral homes, providing back to the beginning of this presentation. Mike, you had said it that, and Dan said it, we're providing them, very valuable advertising, whether they recognize it or not. So we've really gotten behind the value-added branding for funeral homes. We've done some things on the family side with making the print side larger font, larger photos. That has gone over very well in our market. So it's just constantly trying to stay one step ahead to keep us relevant, for many years to come. And, with the franchise of the digital side of things, like I said, I could probably attest for every newspaper person on this call that their Obits channel is probably number 1, 2, or 3 in total traffic.
Yeah.
So these are, we got to capitalize on that. Print is obviously still very important to us all, but we got to equally be looking at digital as important, if not more, because it is where this will ultimately, be the predominant part of this space.
Well, that was exactly where I was heading with the next question. Where are you at Lee with your directive or how you're directing print versus digital? Where do you see the revenue today, and where is it going to be coming in the future? I think you just said half of the answer to the question right there. You're keeping a strong eye on the digital side, correct?
Yeah, we've engaged this. Basically, we have an initiative out right now in terms, you say, of it being directive, that we are engaging our top 6 funeral homes in every single one of our markets. And that is a just kind of restart, hi, nice to meet you, nice to see you again, talking about the business as a whole. And that's not only the Obit side, but the Obit side specifically. Okay, what works well in terms of our relationship of you placing Obits? What can we do better? What are efficiencies we can give you? Again, self-service has come up many a times. This has also opened the door to digital spending by these funeral homes to promote their business, for pre-planning, things of that nature. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach that we're approaching this. But the key is the funeral home relationships are still going to be key. While we do that, we are providing private party, all these different entry points to continue to place obits, memoriams, whatever they may be. So I don't think it's one particular answer or one golden ticket, but that's kind of how we are approaching things right now, and kind of trying to get it from all different directions.
Dan, what do you mean by this $500 traditional and print versus digital getting to value parity?
So Mike, this slide's a build. And so if you click through it, you'll see the reveal here. But basically go back to the other slide, the one before it though.
Sure, I'd be happy
to. Kind of building on each other. So basically we've always thought of it as digital versus print, right? And when you bifurcate, much of what Brian's saying is like, look, and Brian, jump in here, right? If I'm not paraphrasing correctly, but like, look, there's not one monolithic channel, right? There's a funeral home channel and there's a private party channel, and you're going to treat both differently, right? And the private party side, trying to sell digital obits to the funeral home, I think would be more difficult. But if you can bifurcate the two channels and say, look, private party, we're going to start testing different things, different price points, different offerings, digital only obit, right? And to date, right, we've always thought the digital obit is worth less than the print obit, right? You can't sell that for $500, right? And what we want to challenge that at Legacy by saying, let's test into that. Let's test into the offering that is digital first and try and get to parity. So if you click it again, right? There you go.
Here we go.
We think it's greater than or equal to that. Yeah, missed the punchline there. But Mike,
Oh,
you
sorry,
get
go ahead.
everyone. No, everyone gets the idea, right? That, like, sorry, I didn't know who was presenting, so my bad. But keep going. Keep going. We'll get to the next one.
I will be your Vanna White and turn letters.
Yeah. So this is the only reason they keep me around is for my PowerPoint skills. But here, I mean, on average, let's say the print and digital obit, because that's a package today, right? But mostly you're selling the value of the print, right? And that's what the families see, right? But in the future, we think, if you click again, right, can you have a base price of a digital obit at $150? So if you click again, can we then offer a memorialization video for another $150 with a thumb drive, right? That we create. We have really, really interesting technology around creating memorialization videos where you upload the photos and it takes anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. You set it to music and it's a beautiful tribute, right? We're working on that solution and we're testing that with another paper, right? If you click again, right, you can see the value going up, right? The next solution is a printed keepsake book, right? A QR code that you can put on the gravestone, right? Can you get to that $500 value by testing? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a company we own called Memory Links. It's really cool. They have this like laser etched QR code that you can stick anything from like grandma's portrait in your living room to the headstone at your local cemetery, right? And it can link back to the St. Louis Post Dispatch's obit on their site. And it can be branded St. Louis Post Dispatch. I mean, it's a fantastic feature. We're still rolling that one out, the thumb drive, the video and the thumb drive and the base digital obit, obviously those are there and ready today, and we are testing those. But the main idea, the main takeaway here is the private party platform is ideal testing bed for testing products and testing pricing.
Brittany wants to know, and it's a good question. By the way, I'm in Q&A. Some people are saying that the host has turned off chat. The host has not turned off chat. Legacy, I mean, not like Zoom has turned it off, but Brittany's asking in Q&A, and I'll keep my eyes on that one if anyone wants to. And by the way, we have 10 minutes left, so now is the time to jump into the Q&A platform. Tracy, I know you're in the background. Make sure you're staying in there as well and answering questions. So the newspapers can sell all these extensions of the obit, and we would receive the revenue from this. Is this a revenue share? Is it profitable? Are you guys keeping the most and giving off 15%? I mean, what's going on here?
It would be the opposite first of all, one thing, the 500, that we just use that as an illustration. We understand that, hey, there are some markets charging 500, but it doesn't mean you couldn't do a $250 version of this or test your way into what the right level is based on your market.
Yeah, and to answer a few questions, Ernie, so guys, this is just an illustration of what a digital obit could be. On the other side of it, what we're doing today, yes, the service fee depends on the newspaper, and yes, we are charging a service fee, but the newspaper is getting exactly what their rate is for that obituary. We're not taking any of that, if that makes sense.
And when it comes to these products, we would, most of the margins going to the newspaper. We would figure that out in the, in setting that up. If somebody was going to offer some of these or a combination along with a base digital obit.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna do a gotcha question. I hope you don't mind. And if I lose you as an advertiser, shame on me, and I apologize. But this is an important question because we keep our ear to ground at ENP, and you're not the only supersized aggregator that's helping our industry in a specific vertical. And Lee has blessed you, obviously. We're honored to have Brian on this, but there are some publishers I talk to that are scared of doing this because years and years and years ago, they keep talking about how they started Cars.com. Cars.com got frustrated with our industry because we didn't move nimble enough. And suddenly, rather than work through their media partners, they started working directly with consumers. Do you understand what I'm saying? And they're scared of giving you our juice. I just want to, if it's a gotcha question, my apologies.
No, it's not. It's not.
Fine. Yeah.
Our founder loves this.
Oh, he loves this question?
He loves this question because he eats it up. You know why? Because we're still here. We're still here and we're driving placements and we're still trying to grow this category because we know there's so
But don't you get frustrated some nights? You guys are sitting around the conference table late and you open up that single malt scotch and say, the hell with these guys. We're way smarter than them. We know where we're going. Let's just dump it. That does not happen in your culture at all. No?
No, it honestly, it doesn't. And the fact that we took on the private party network didn't exist. We had to, we leveraged some assets, from different parts of our company, but we had to create it. And there are 30, 40 people working on it at any given time. And there are daily meetings with most of those people in it. And it's all around driving the newspaper activity. When you have days, we're looking at the orders coming in hourly for newspapers. And there are days, Mike, where we have over 90 different papers getting at least one order in the network, and so everything we're doing and investing in this is around supporting it. And I've gone so far as to say, and some of the people on this call have probably heard me say it, that hey, our founder did a great job getting legacy going, and there was a lot we've done for papers over the years, but there's more we can do for newspapers today and are doing than we've ever been able to do before. And so as this we'll circle back with you in another webinar and bring other folks, to support what Brian said. This is the biggest thing. And even Dan had mentioned the story about, could you get us one more obit, in a market or whatever that was, but it sounds small, But if you get, in terms of just playing this out and adjusting to the trends or taking advantage of the trends, if you get one more, obit a day, private party, average one a day, that's 365 or so. The average funeral home does 120 services or calls a year. They don't have an obit for all of them, but let's say they did, So you're getting the equivalent, one more private party obit a day, of 100% of the volume from 3 funeral homes, Nobody's
total
getting 100% of the volume for any funeral home, right? And so this is the value, and this is what we're working on. We get to do it every day. Our publishing partners have a lot of things to worry about, right, every day. So this is what we're bringing to them to make sure they're taking full advantage of everything they can.
I would like to say we have 5 minutes left in our dialogue, the Q&A. And by the way, Tracy in the background is doing an excellent job responding to questions. But if there's something you'd like to ask, please jump in there now. All right. I mean, that was a loaded question because I've had your founder on this very platform, and I do know that he has ink in his veins. I mean, he has a love of this industry, and every time I tried to get him into the corner saying, "You're really doing this for the money," he kept screaming back, "No, I'm doing this to preserve a legacy." He kept loving,
And I can tell you, Mike, one other thing on this, others are though, you know what I mean? There are people out there who don't care about newspapers, right? Who are happy to go get content and publish it and solicit obits and take obits in any way they can get them, right? And we're here to work, right, with our partners to figure it out because it's not us, right? There are challenges out there, whether it's the funeral home website providers, right? Whether it's some other group that's trying to be a kind of a lower end aggregator or whatever it is, there are other choices. Like we said at the beginning, going forward, where and how obits are getting published, that's to be determined going ahead. We're trying to figure it out and figure it out with our partners.
Because
Ryan, in the
what's up
last
for
few,
grabs?
okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
What's up for grabs, Mike? Right. The newspapers have the lead in becoming that destination for memorialization in every community. Facebook doesn't have it. The local funeral home doesn't have it, right? It's perfect for the newspaper, right? They are the perfect partner for legacy, and we can help them realize that via Private Party and the funeral home channel.
And an Axios local newsletter doesn't have it, or a blogger in their pajamas with cats around them doesn't have it. It's the masthead. This is, and I believe the same thing should be for births and wedding announcements and all the others. I think we should be getting back into that space more and more and more. I'm going to let Brian blow some smoke at you guys now, because Brian, what I understand is you sometimes get on the phone and help them. They work with you directly to help, jigger things and make things work. What is customer service like? Do you feel sometimes that you're just typing something into support emails and waiting 5 days for a response from these guys? What's it like? Because you're, no offense, but your hindquarters is on the line, right? You're working with them, but your senior management doesn't care who your vendor is. Your senior management cares in results. Do I have that correct, sir?
Yeah, and just to add something, before, as terms of the gotcha question, is for us here at Lee, or for me, I haven't drank the legacy Kool-Aid. Every decision we've made and direction we've gone in has been in the best interest for Lee, but legacy has been able to provide us with all of those resources in the direction we want to go. And in terms of customer service, outstanding. And those that know me, I'm an impatient person. So
yes,
for me to say that, in terms of whatever issues or we've had or concerns, questions, we've got the full contact group of legacy that we can reach out to and literally get an answer or contact with within a very short distance of time. So it's just, for us, this partnership was, one that was a huge directional change for us as we did this with legacy a couple of years ago.
Right.
But it's been about, the collaboration. It's not, we're not setting a box here. We break those boxes down. We've rolled out several initiatives, done some partnership things together that just really is in the best interest for our organization. And I think as Dan and Ernie said, theirs as well.
And we didn't even touch on I'm going to brag on these guys, because the previous we did one about 7 months ago in this very program. I love the fact that you guys offer innovative ways to post that content as content. Brian here doesn't just have to have a vertical. He can have a beautiful memorial site. Do you see what I'm saying? And you guys allow that content to really look amazing. And I think that's what I like the most, because I'm all into a very good user experience too. It's not just, Craigslist is the ugliest site in the world. It has its place, but this is not a place where you want to be a Craigslist. Do I have that right, Dan? This is a place where you want to look good and you want to really be.
And really take advantage of the community engagement that Obits enable. It's a great form of community. Dan said it, newspapers are continue to be well positioned, but it takes continuing to evolve so that they can stay that way when it comes to this content of interest locally.
Dan, final thoughts, because we're going to close it out.
Well, we're constantly improving, right? And so the user experience is great, but it's going to be getting better. We've got some really exciting things rolling out in Q4. We won't need to get into that, but we're constantly improving on both private party and on the memorialization experience on our newspaper's behalf on their sites.
I'm going to answer the number one question we get at the end of every single one of these broadcasts. Will there be a recording so you can share it with someone else at your company? The answer is yes. The recording of this will be sent out later today. So, and those of you that didn't sign up, I can't talk to you. I mean, that did sign up but didn't attend, which is you've already known that you're going to get a recording too, but why am I saying that? Because you're not here. Anyway, Brian Wells, Senior Director of Classified at Lee Enterprises, an honor, sir. Thank you for your input. I know you're extremely busy. Thanks for being part of this conversation. Ernie Roth, excuse me, General Manager of Channel Partnerships at Legacy. Dan Bodie, Chief Revenue Officer at Legacy. Gentlemen, congratulations on staying ahead of the curve. You know what, you guys remind me of the great Wayne Gretzky. When asked by media why he was so good at his craft, he said, "I skate to where the puck is going." And every time I have a conversation with you guys, because we do it often because you're one of our marketing partners, I always feel like you're always trying to stay way ahead of that damn puck, so you're never caught behind. So congratulations on an amazingly great interface. It's just beautiful. So good job, guys. Can I just ask one last question?
Thank you.
If people want more information about being part of your family, where do they go? Who do they contact? I'll leave that up to Ernie here. Ernie, who do they contact if they need to learn more or they want to get on board?
We'll be reaching out for sure, but you can email newspapers@legacy.com or go to legacy.com and there's ways to reach us and we'll get back to you promptly.
Gentlemen, thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon, and everybody stay healthy and stay profitable. Have a great day.
Thank you.